I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. And with all due respect to critics of government waste here in Iowa, we don't think there's anything wrong with just a little bit of pork. Hello from Smitty's in Des Moines, Iowa, home of the world's best tenderloin sandwich. We're here in the place where politics and pork collide. And as always, there's a lot going on. 11 Republican presidential hopefuls spoke over the weekend at a party confab here in Des Moines. Rick Santorum, Rick Perry, and Mike Huckabee are all in the state today. And Hillary Clinton is up the road in Mason City making the case just a few moments ago for her experience.
We are living in an incredibly complicated time in American history. It is not a time for easy answers or glib answers or one-liners or applause lines. Those are all great. That's part of campaigning. But at the end of the day, we need a president who has both the experience and the understanding to deal with the complexity of the problems that we face.
Tomorrow, Clinton moves on to Cedar Falls during this two-day swing. She plans to focus on small business. She's going to call for less red tape, easier access to capital, and a simplified tax system. Also trying to boost exports for small business people. John, she's never going to get the endorsement of the NFIB, but can Hillary Clinton be the candidate of the moms and the pops?
My favorite thing about these speeches is at this stage in the campaign is that she's for cutting red tape, apple pie, expanding access to capital, cherry pie, tax relief, pumpkin pie, and expanding access, and yes, and more growth abroad. She's not a candidate. She's not seen as a left-wing Democrat. And some small business people, she's not a bad candidate as a candidate of Main Street, potentially, more so than a lot of Democrats. She is also, though, will always be remembered in a lot of people's minds as the candidate of Clinton Care, and now as an endorser of Obamacare. Yeah. And there's not much, there are a few places that are where those things are less popular than in the small business community.
But there's a different kind of small business community than is traditionally thought of. There's a small businesses started by members of the coalition of the Ascendant. Hillary Clinton's people know that this is a twofer for her, yes. Really a threefer. It allows her to be talk about business issues, get her away from the far left stuff she's been talking about. Right. Two, it allows her to distance herself from President Obama because a lot of small business people have been frustrated in the current economy. And three, it allows her to speak to, in a targeted way, again, younger people, non-white people starting small businesses. I think it's very smart for her to do it.
And I'd add further to that, you will always hear when she talks about small business people, she'll always talk about entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs is talking directly to Silicon Valley, the next generation voters she wants, and the next generation money that she needs.
I left off my list the other small business creators, females, which is a big constituent for her. Let's get the specifics.
It's a smart play for her.
Let's get the specifics. Obviously, as you suggested, the list is kind of meaningless without the specifics.
And we'll get to another one of those when we talk about Christie later.
Right now, we've just got a bunch of bullet points, but I think it's smart politics for her to do it.
Okay. We all know that so far Hillary Clinton has not done much talking to the press, but she has been talking to non-press credentialed Americans. Today in Mason City, she explained why.
Not only do I learn a lot, but I also feel like it's the best way to make those connections that will not only give me a firm foundation in the caucus here in Iowa or in a primary in New Hampshire, because it really is about people-to-people connections if we're really talking about what we want to do, but it will also give me the kind of information I need to be an even better president.
So there you have the explanation. Earlier today, we got the detailed evidence in the form of an email from American Bridge. That's a group of Hillary supporters who took the extraordinary step of documenting every single question that Hillary has asked to the everyday people she's met during the campaign, and it's been asked by those same everyday people. Mark, how much merit is there in this retort/gambit?
Not none. I think it is important that she's taking questions. The audiences are not general public, they're selected people, and some of the questions published on this list, I'd say, were not particularly compelling. Some of them weren't even questions. But I think it is the case that reporters ask different questions, often important questions, and her supporters are proving she is talking to voters about issues.
Well, this is also one of those things where the campaign is setting up a false binary. It's like either she can talk to and hear from everyday Americans, or she can talk to the press. No, this is an and both. She's absolutely right to be doing what she's doing, but she's also wrong to not be taking questions from the press. She's got to field them all. That's what being a presidential candidate is all about.
Correct. Now, We know why she's not taking questions, because there's a lot of unhappy topics that would be asked.
You're going to talk about the New York Times now,
New York
aren't you?
Times just ran a story about Sidney Blumenthal, her longtime associate, who wrote her a lot of memos when she was in the State Department about Libya. If she had a press conference today or tomorrow, she would be asked about Sidney Blumenthal. She doesn't want to talk about that. She is still holding out. I think she'll have a press conference soon, but not today.
Yes, and there's no doubt that Sidney Blumenthal will be one of the many questions that the press want to ask her about. The story in the New York Times writes about him. He's always been a shadowy and very influential figure in Clinton world, known to some of his detractors within that world as Grassy Knoll, Sidney Blumenthal. Some of the stuff that the Times has in that story is a little dodgy, to say the least.
I think she can hold out longer than I thought before. All right, switching to the other party. Today in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Christie gave a foreign policy speech. There was some policy in the speech. For instance, he called for increased defense spending on a variety of weapons systems and other things for the Pentagon. But there was also in the speech some mood setting, listening to Christie talk about the aftermath of 9/11, just before he became the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey and when his wife, Mary Pat, was working just blocks away from the World Trade Center.
I remembered what it felt like to be waiting for a phone call from Mary Pat, hoping and praying that she was okay. I know what it feels like to lose people when they should be safe, at work, at home, on our streets. This is not theoretical to me. I lived it. I lived it in my own home. Everything changed that morning in September. So for the next 7 years of my life, my office focused on fighting terrorism every day.
There was also in the talk a lot of Christie's trademark tough talk and talk about leadership. His target in this case, Vladimir Putin.
We should immediately put travel bans and asset freezes on every member of the Russian parliament and all of Putin's inner circle, including Putin himself. We know who holds the leash on the dogs of war, so let's not mess around on this. And if that still isn't enough, we should look at tougher sanctions.
So Christie previously talked about entitlement reform. He talked about the economy. He's gotten good marks for these speeches, tax reform. How will this one be received, do you think?
Well, I think it will be, again, I've said before that I think it's good for him to be focused on substance. If there's going to be a path back for him, that's the way. I will go back to my earlier point, though. The subheadings in this speech: stronger defense, stronger intelligence, stronger alliances, and a great generation. There's not much more policy substance in this speech than those subheads suggest.
I will say, of all the major policy addresses any of the prospective candidates have given so far, this was about the most detailed, except for Christie's other two speeches. He did have some specifics on the budget, about how he wants the Pentagon spent. He did make some specific recommendations about intelligence. He went after Rand Paul implicitly on national security and civil liberties. So I think Christie, I give him really high marks for explaining to people what he would do. And in terms of style, I thought stylistically this was a lot stronger than the Rubio foreign policy speech from a few days ago.
Well, and I also think that the notion of this thing with strength rhymes with Christie, and so that's a good theme for him. He pulls it off better than some of the other governors do.
Stronger than Rubio. I shouldn't have said much stronger, but it was strong.
Okay. All right. A number of 2016ers have formally announced their candidacies, while many more are still waiting to do it. Lately, they've been hinting at it a lot, and the sheer ridiculousness of that exercise is really quite staggering. If you don't know what we're talking about here, take a look at this.
On Friday, you said that there's a 99.9% chance that you are going to make an announcement to run for president. You know, when you're a little kid, your mom says there's no time like the present. We offer you this beautiful platform.
Well, I will make an announcement on June 1st. You're all invited to come spend money when you do, and I will tell you what I'm going to do about running for president.
Martin OMalley is inching towards a presidential campaign. OMalley has set a May 30th announcement in Baltimore, Maryland, though his aides have remained coy about precisely what it's going to be about.
May 27th in Butler, Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up, is where we're going to make our decision and announcement as to what our plans are for 2016.
So I guess this is an announcement that on that date you are going to announce.
On that date, we're going to make an announcement about our plan.
Mark, we all understand that this is kabuki. We all laugh at it as kabuki. We also know that there are legal reasons why people do this. What, in this environment, given the constraints, what's the best way to announce for president?
I think some people make fun of it. It's smart to get attention, particularly for some of these people less well known. I don't care how many times they do announce an announcement of an announcement. It's all good as long as you handle it well. I think it's all fine.
And occasionally, every once in a while, someone who you think is going to come out with an announcement that they're going to run comes out with an announcement and says they're actually not going to run.
John
Bolton as an example. I wonder if any of these guys that we've seen just there in that string of audio and video, any of those guys you think are actually not going to run?
The difference between them and John Bolton is all of them have run for office before, and in the case of some of them have run for president before. So no, I think they're all likely to run. But I think the press likes to mock these fake announcements or these intermediate steps. They're a little bit mockable. But you look at who's gotten good positive attention. It's smart. They got to get their names out there. Right. All right, up next, a real Hawkeye State media dean, OK Henderson, news director of Radio Iowa, live from Smitty's right after this.
Our guest tonight is OK Henderson, the news director of Radio Iowa. Okay, thanks for coming down to Smitty's. There was a big dinner in Iowa this weekend with a bunch of Republicans. Who did well, who didn't do so well?
Carly Fiorina did well. I think there were folks like Bobby Jindal who really didn't register on the applause scale very much.
Why did Carly do well in your view? She's the only one you mentioned who has something done well, so you're going to have to justify that assessment with at least a little bit more detail.
She told a story about hormones, which went over really well with at least half of the audience, the females, and the men who were there with their wives applauded as well.
Okay, so Jeb Bush comes into this dinner, one of the speakers. He had a pretty good reception afterwards at his actual reception, people say. But they let it be known shortly before the dinner that he wasn't going to compete in the straw poll. Will not competing in the straw poll hurt Jeb Bush's chance of doing well in the caucuses?
Just like it didn't hurt Mitt Romney in 2012, I don't think it will have that much of an impact.
It won't, so he can skip with impunity.
I think the straw poll this time around is going to be nothing like straw polls of the past. There's even the idea that maybe there won't be a straw poll. I mean, we haven't had a candidate who's yet said, hey, I'm going to come.
So right now they're 0 for whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just sticking with Bush for a second, we've seen, at least in the public polls, we've seen his position here plummet in the recent polling. What accounts for, maybe he was not at the top of the pack, but he was up near the top of the pack for a while, and then suddenly we got this Quinnipiac poll that had him down in 7th place. What if that's true, if that rings true to you, what accounts for it?
He hasn't been here a lot. The folks who have been here, the Scott Walkers, the Ted Cruz, those folks have sort of vaulted to the front because people have met them. They've heard them speak in person. So they haven't been able to evaluate him on the ground here in Iowa. Number two, this could be a lot like 1996 with Bob Dole. Bob Dole won what everybody thought was a convincing victory. In retrospect, it was only like a 2% victory over Lamar Alexander in a pretty large field. So this guy may face a field that's exponentially larger than the one that Bob Dole faced in 96. So he could do well by winning, with less than 20% here.
Scott Walker is said to have done decently over the weekend, but not huge dominating performance.
Well,
but
he didn't throw off the coat. I mean, he didn't. Yeah, the coat was on.
But he's
like Samson, with the hair. I don't know.
Most of the people I've talked to here think that he's still the favorite to win the caucuses today.
He's a neighboring son.
Yeah. Are there anybody from the Ted Cruz, Rick Perry, Carly Fiorina? Is there anybody you would say right now is a dark horse to be a bigger player by February than is seen right now?
I think people are taking a look at Carly Fiorina. I think her problem will be the things that she has just recently said, sort of moderating her stand on same-sex marriage. That's going to be a problem with a huge voting bloc here in Iowa, evangelical Christians. I think there's still a chance for somebody to score maybe 3 or 4%, and when you have this huge field, somebody like a Lindsey Graham who catches fire because, he's basically a stand-up comedian compared to the rest of the crowd, and if he gets, just a little sympathy vote for, style points on how he delivers his banquet jokes, that could be a real thorn in the side of the folks who would like to amass something bigger than 20% here.
Let me ask you one last Republican question, Kay, before we talk about Hillary, who's here in Iowa. Rick Santorum about to announce, we think. Mike Huckabee, who just did, past 2 caucus winners in the state, who don't seem to be showing as much strength here, let's say, as some might expect.
I think Huckabee is more than Santorum. Obviously, Santorum starting from ground zero, where he started at before. He seems willing to put in the legwork. I think Huckabee has some residual, support around the state. I think people don't realize, of course, I'm a radio person. A lot of people heard him on the radio. He did a huge amount of work on the radio, and so he kept his voice, if you will, in Iowa homes in a way that a lot of the other, candidates in the past who were second-place finishers have never done.
Hillary Clinton got a lot of votes in 2008, but she finished third because 2 two guys got a lot more votes.
Exactly.
People didn't give her credit for running a good campaign last time. I don't think she would say she ran a particularly good campaign. The national media doesn't think she's running a good campaign this time, including in Iowa. Iowans who you talk to, do they think she's running a good campaign?
There's a real restive part of the Democratic Party who want this vigorous debate. There are folks out there who want Elizabeth Warren to enter the race. There are people who've been really energized by the Martin O'Malley rallies that he's held around the state. She is in Sarasota County today, and that is a county that she won on caucus night in 2008. Tomorrow, she's going to a place where Obama won by 43%. So she's got to go to those places and connect with people who didn't have a connection with her 8 years ago.
This is only her second trip here since she announced. But do you notice anything different about how she's doing it this time from how she did it last time?
No.
No.
Short answer, no.
Identical.
It seems identical.
Entitled, imperious, distant from the people, that kind of thing? Or you mean just a huge entourage?
The nature of the events are very similar. Invited guests, small venues.
Right. Okay.
If you could ask her a question today, what would it be?
I don't think I'm going to tell you because then she would know what my question was. I want her to be
ask
on
a fake one. Throw her off the scent. Maybe ask her one of the questions the real people
Well, does she like the kind of tenderloins they serve at Smitty's, which are kind of thin and crispy and wonderful, or does she like the thicker tenderloins that are served elsewhere?
The ones that double as pillows.
Exactly.
In a pinch.
So that could be a question.
Do you think? I mean, do you think there's a big hunger here? I know you said there was some part of the electorate that was hungry
for Smitty's tenderloin.
Well, I know there's a huge hunger for Smitty's tenderloin. In fact, I'm hungry for one right now myself. But do you think there's a decent chunk of the Iowa electorate that really would consider in a serious way an alternative to Hillary Clinton?
There's a hunger among Democrats, and this may be a weird juxtaposition, but I can't tell you how disappointed they are that Joni Ernst is the first woman elected to a huge statewide office in Iowa, and so. She's not going to mention it, she being Hillary Clinton, but the fact that she is a she can really be an energizing force for Iowa Democratic voters.
All right, Kay, thank you so much for coming here, although given the other attractions of this place, it's not that big a sacrifice for you to come in the afternoon. We'll be right back.
Iowa is the heart of America, not just geographically, but because every presidential candidate has to come here at one point or another. Our polling partner in crime, Ann Seltzer, who also happens to be one of the best pollsters in America, joins us now. Ann, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So we talked about Hillary Clinton and whether she's addressing reporters, whether she's addressing issues. What is your sense of what Iowa voters, whether they're Republicans or Democrats or unaligned, what issues do they want candidates to address this time around?
I think what they want is meat on the bone. And I guess as I look at Hillary Clinton's campaign, it's skating a little bit over the surface. I think they're looking for her to give them substance. So she's talking a lot about she'll fight for them, but not really talking at the level of depth that I think Iowa voters are used to.
And what is it you think that right now in this, we are in an interesting place. The country's in recovery, but not a super robust recovery. What, beyond the perennials, we hear about jobs, we care about our families, what are the things more particular this moment that Iowa voters care about?
Well, I think I just can't overstate the importance of leadership, because that's the deficit that they see that they have now. So that's terribly important to them. I think the trade issue is very important to Iowans because we are a bountiful state and we have to do something with the surplus food that we produce here. I think they're very interested in that. I think really people think Iowans will have very parochial interests, and really I think they care about the same things everybody else does, in depth, but with greater depth.
So on the Republican side, one of the things you are so good at is trying to figure out the makeup of the electorate in a way that will match up what will be people who actually turn out to caucus. Nobody knows how many people are going to caucus on the Republican side. Could be 100,000. Some people think it could be 200,000 with 16 candidates in the race. Do you see inexorably, if you've got 14, 15 candidates, do you see that leads inexorably to more people turning out to caucus?
You would think. The hazard that these candidates face is coming into Iowa assuming that it's this small little group who will show up at caucus. And now they're fighting for their share of a very small pie.
About 80,000 people.
About 80,000 people. And so the smart candidates will say, I've got to go beyond that. Mike Huckabee won with the most votes a Republican ever got, which is about 40,000.
Substantially more, I think.
Well, 38 was Santorum and Romney were in that range, so not too far away. My point is that bar is not that high. If you can go out and find 40,000 new voters.
Who are the people who haven't participated in the past who somebody could get in, and how do you get them in?
Well, there's two ways you can get more people. You can get more of the same who show up, and that's going to be dominated by the Christian right. And then you can go and find the moderates who typically say, I'm not that excited about any of these candidates because they're talking to the Christian right, therefore I'll stay home. So it really is a candidate who can come in and match who they are with the Iowans who align with that. And then it is a tough job. Show up on this night at this time and support me.
Well, this is, of course, the thing that, as you know, better than anyone, what Barack Obama did in 2008.
That's exactly
Not only increased the size of, but also it changed the composition of the caucus electorate on the Democratic side. As you look around, A, do you think there is any obvious Republican candidate or candidates who have the capacity to do that? And B, do you see any evidence of it so far? People trying to make the effort to do that here where you live?
I'll answer the last one first, which is no. We're in an early stage, so not much effort there.
It's not that early.
It's not that early. Obama was doing it by May of 2007.
You're right. Yeah. But I think the obvious answer of who has the potential would be Rand Paul, because he starts with a base that his father built, that he's a known quantity in the state. And there's some libertarian things that normal caucus voters aren't necessarily showing up to talk about. So he's someone who could bring in a different kind of caucus goer, and 40,000 votes for Rand Paul, that's not impossible.
Jeb Bush, we talk all the time about whether he can do well in the state. Does he have a natural constituency amongst Iowa Republicans?
Does he have I think he could build it. I don't today I don't think he has it, but I think if he comes in and Iowans begin to think that some of these other members of the field are scary, then there's the group of Iowans who want a scary president, and then they'll split that vote, and Jeb can appear potentially as someone who is tested and sort of more level. And that may appeal to enough people who haven't caucused before to say, look, enough. We need somebody who can lead.
We've seen him grappling over the course of all last week with the specifics of his brother's policy and with the nature of the dynastic presidential candidacy that he has. Which of those is a bigger problem for him? Is it the specifics of what W stood for, or is it that he looks like the past and will be just associated with yesterday rather than tomorrow?
I think he can get over the dynasty once people get to know him. But this last week was not a good platform for him in showing who he is.
And thanks very much. The greatest Iowa tradition is Smitty's itself. We'll be right back after
this. Our thanks to Smitty's here in Des Moines. Oh my God, it is so fantastic. They fed us pretty much all the pork tenderloins we could ever want. Not all of them, because our appetite is insatiable, but a large portion.
Tomorrow, our guest, Milwaukee Bucks owner and Democratic fundraiser, Mark Lazary, will be here. We'll be back in New York with him. Remember, we're on twice a day at 5 and at 8. Until tomorrow, we say to you from Des Moines, sayonara.